For me, shooting days often begin long before the sun rises. This is me, David Cebulla. I'm a full-time filmmaker and wildlife explorer from Germany. While I have traveled further and further into the remotest corners of the world for my films in recent years, right on my doorstep there has always been one project that has fallen by the wayside. I have always wanted to film young foxes during their first days outside the den. Being a wildlife filmmaker means being at home outdoors. When I arrive at the filming location, I immediately check which direction the wind is coming from. I pay attention to every change, look for tracks in the ground and listen to every sound in the forest. I live with the weather and the seasons, and I know the places where deer sleep, eagle owls breed, and foxes and badgers have their dens. This gives me insights into a world that remains hidden to most people. In order to blend in with my surroundings, good camouflage is absolutely essential. Depending on the season, the prevailing vegetation and the dominant colors in nature, I use and combine different camouflage patterns. I mostly use military camouflage techniques and combine them with my own experience. One of the most important items of equipment is my hand-knotted ghillie suit. Like the balaclava, both serve to break up and conceal hard contours and human features. Now in spring it's still bearable, but when temperatures climb above 30 degrees Celsius in summer, camouflage becomes a real test of endurance. However, these precautions are essential if I want to get close to the animals and document their undisturbed natural behavior. Back in winter, I scouted out several fox dens on various days and finally decided in spring to try my luck at one of them. The fresh earth thrown out suggests activity. Most young foxes emerge from their dens for the first time in the last week of April or the first week of May. That's why I regularly sit there for hours from mid-April onwards, well camouflaged. An adult fox leaves the den. That's a very good sign, because it means that the den is actually being used. I could tell very quickly from the teats that the animal must be the female. So it seems she really does have young. After briefly cleaning her fur, the vixen probably goes hunting. I find that astonishing, since she is typically cared for by the male during the early stages of rearing the young. Now the question for me is whether and when the cubs will come out for the first time. I don't want to miss that moment, so I am back at the fox den a few days later. And suddenly something happens. A small cub takes its first clumsy steps out of the den. It explores the immediate surroundings of the entrance. Everything here is new to the little one. The light, the smells, the sounds. It moves clumsily through the undergrowth. It explores with curiosity a world that had previously remained hidden behind the entrance to the burrow. But it can also be frightening, especially when you have unwittingly strayed too far from the burrow and apparently cannot find your way back. Disoriented, the little one wanders around. The only thing that helps is to call out loudly. For almost a quarter of an hour, the little one wanders around the entrance to the den, calling out. Meanwhile, the mother is also looking attentively for her baby. After all, the loud cries could also attract potential predators to the den, and her puppy seems increasingly helpless. The vixen cautiously emerges from the den to help it. Close to the tip of her tail, two little siblings can now be seen for the first time. The mother carefully takes the calling cub in her mouth and carries it back to the den. The siblings follow the vixen as well, and so calm returns to the hillside. I was actually expecting nothing to happen for a while, so that I could review my recordings. But before I know it, the mother reappears in front of the den. Now I have to be very quiet again. The mother must not notice me under any circumstances. Any sudden movement, even the slightest noise or any trace of my scent could be fatal. The vixen is alert, but still completely relaxed. After all the excitement surrounding the stray pup, the mother now has everything under her watchful eye. She seems to be enjoying the break in the fresh air and sits down. To my great delight, all 4 pups have shown up. They still have short hair and are almost exclusively black-brown. Only the white tips of their tails stand out. The puppies stay very close to their mother. In the first few weeks after giving birth, the female rarely leaves the burrow. But that's exactly what makes this observation so special to me. Being able to watch the mother with her puppies in such an intimate moment makes me incredibly happy. She uses the short break to groom her little ones. Her tongue gently strokes their soft puppy fur. After cleaning the puppies, it's time for a quick clean-up session for the mother. The vixen seems to be enjoying sunbathing and begins to doze off. When I started the project in winter, I wouldn't have dared to even dream of taking such pictures. Despite the supposed break, the mother continues to keep a close eye on her young. One of the puppies keeps trying to reach her teats to drink. I estimate that the little foxes are about 4 to 5 weeks old. After a gestation period of 50 days, the pups weighing only 50 to 100 grams at the time were born in the den. Their eyes remained closed until the 2nd week after their birth. The mother keeps dozing off, but she's still extremely alert. Her ears pricked up, listening for noises in the environment. That doesn't make it any easier for me. I still can't move at all and have to avoid even the slightest noise. After the initial excitement of exploring their new surroundings, calm slowly returns. The fox family enjoys their time in front of the burrow. This pup and the mother seem to have fallen asleep. After the cold nights, the sun seems to do them good, even if the fur seems to itch in the rising warmth. While the vixen is still trying to take a nap, the little puppies have other plans and are scurrying around clumsily. The vixen now curls up tightly. I suspect that she wants to prevent the puppies from reaching her teats. However, this does not stop the puppies from climbing on and around their mother. The den of the litter is located on a slope in shell limestone. Due to the stone seed storage function, it is a good location for a burrow. In addition to more open areas with scree and dry grassland, there are also various bushes and pine trees. Meanwhile, the little ones are playing energetically with each other. Their playful roughhousing can get pretty intense at times, especially since the puppy's milk teeth have already come through. The games between littermates are not just a pastime or an expression of joy. This initial test of strengths also helps to establish the pecking order and to form a hierarchy within the family group. As long as the young foxes are playing in front of me, I hardly have time to glance at the great spotted woodpecker beside me. Nevertheless, they are my constant companions and can be seen very often. Their calls and their pounding accompany my waiting. Above me in the trees, they search for larvae under the bark. Meanwhile, the vixen gets a little ear massage. And speaking of ears, I also get to hear once again the little ones making a variety of impressive sounds and calls. The puppies have been outside with their mother for about 3/4 of an hour now. A quick clean, one last attempt at climbing, and the vixen finishes sunbathing. What a fantastic experience to be able to witness such an intimate moment. I actually wanted to call it a day, but the rustling sound next to me makes me prick up my ears. A herd of wild boars is passing right next to me. It's impossible to retreat now without scaring the animals and putting myself in danger. There are several sows with their piglets in tow. They search for food in the forest floor. This includes roots, worms, grubs, mice, snails and mushrooms. And of course they also need to scratch themselves in between when their fur itches. This is important because wild boars have short necks, which makes it difficult for them to clean themselves with their teeth and rid themselves of annoying insects. Slowly, the group disappears behind me into the forest, and I can end this incredible day of filming with so many exciting impressions. I began preparing for the project back in winter. I spent several days traveling to various locations in search for potential fox dens. My goal was to find a number of dens that would hopefully be used in spring, where I would have a chance to take my shots. I intensified my search in areas where I could also actively observe foxes, such as here for example, while hunting. But already in winter, the project became unexpectedly time-consuming and stressful, cause I was really not having any luck. So I visited various burrows that I hadn't checked for a long time. A few of them looked good, and as if they were already being prepared for the season. I had filmed at some of the dens in the past. A year ago, I started test filming for the project at this den. Although the foxes appeared as hoped at first, they only sat in front of the den entrance for a very short time and quickly disappeared into the surrounding vegetation. Not long after the foxes, badgers suddenly appeared at the den entrance. That's exciting, because I had read several times about burrows where foxes and badgers live in separate sections of the same burrow. As part of a so-called truce, the foxes leave the badgers and their young, who are potential prey, in peace. But at the same time, it also seems to be actively avoiding them, which could prove unfavorable for longer film shoots. When I returned to the den a year later to film again, only the badgers were still there and the foxes had apparently moved away. So I had to keep searching. But then, one burrow in particular caught my eye. I had already filmed a young fox here briefly for my film Wild Forests, but the burrow had not been used for years after that. Now things seems to be different. I had found my potential filming location. After my initial success, I was eager to find out what would happen next with the little fox family. My passion had been ignited. Observing wild animals undisturbed in their natural habitat is like looking into a different, fantastic world for me, and it never ceases to inspire me. I have been filming more than 2.5 weeks on this project, but I haven't seen the foxes for 5 days, so I am all the more relieved when one morning I see the 4 cubs back at their den. The cubs are now moving confidentially around the entrance to the den on their own. There's no sign of their mother. The little ones sniff and explore their surroundings with their noses. Foxes have an extremely well-developed sense of smell, which is around 400 times better than that of humans. Although they are already somewhat independent, the cubs do not stray too far from the den. That's good for me too. That way, I don't run the risk that the cubs will accidentally discover me in my hiding place on the slope. The tree in front of the burrow entrance seems to be particularly interesting for the cubs. I don't know whether a parent has marked it or something else has left its scent there, but it seems to occupy the little ones and be particularly exciting. Suddenly, the mother reappears. She moves very quietly and surprises me again and again by suddenly appearing somewhere near the burrow. She was probably out hunting and is now checking that everything is okay. Not being discovered by her is the big challenge of the project. But luckily, I'm so well camouflaged that she doesn't know what to make of me and disappears back into the forest. For the first time, I can now briefly see a second mature fox. I can tell him apart by his shaggy-looking tail, so it's most likely the male who is the father helping the female raise the litter. I'm heading back for today. I don't want to risk being spotted by the adult foxes. As I walk, I notice the calls of young birds above me in the trees. They are black woodpeckers. They are the largest European woodpecker species and about the size of a crow. Calling loudly, the young black woodpeckers wait for their parents at a cavity entrance. They prefer beech trees for their nestling cavities and sometimes use them for many years. One of the 2 parents is currently feeding the young nestlings. The nesting tree should ideally be positioned to ensure a clear flight path and a good all-around view. If a cavity provides optimal conditions, the animals will return to it year after year. The lower edge of the nesting hole is usually beveled so that rainwater can drain away. Black woodpeckers feed mainly on various insects and have a preference for different species of ants. There's only a short window of about 2 weeks to film the young birds at the entrance of the nesting cavity before they fly away. After spending so much time at the den, I've developed a very special connection to this place. I'm back at the fox slope. After 3 weeks, I'm now mainly seeing the young cubs in front of the den during the morning hours. Their fur has changed color from black to red, and the little ones already look like real foxes. By now, I have become quite familiar with the hustle and bustle of the 4 siblings. However, today is not the only day I have waited in vain for the 4th pup. I noticed that of the 4 cubs that were there at the beginning, I can now only see a maximum of 3 at a time outside the den. Something has happened and the 4th cub has disappeared. Even later on, it won't show up again. That's strange and I can't really explain the disappearance yet. I'm curious to see how things will turn out for the little fox family. The remaining puppies spend a lot of time waiting for their mother. They often sit quietly at the edge of the burrow, ears pricked alert, perceiving every moment in the wind. One's own shadow can also be a distraction. Every now and then, one of them gazes into the distance, perhaps hoping to hear a familiar sound. Then calm returns with only the rustling of the grass accompanying their wait. It is moments like these when time at the den seems to stand still. I sit completely motionless in my spot, breathing in the rhythm of the forest and becoming a part of the scenery myself. The little cub waits in vain for his mother for a while longer, then disappears back into the slope. Summer is slowly arriving in the hillside of the foxes. Various species of orchids are now in full bloom. Alongside the lady orchid, yellow lady slippers can also be found on the slope. These plants live in symbiosis with a soil fungus. It can take up to 16 years for a lady slipper to flower for the first time. Right nearby in the woods, the white helleborine can be found. It is another orchid that blooms from May to June. However, the onset of summer also means that the vegetation is becoming denser and denser, making it much more difficult to spot the foxes through the thicket. I estimate that the cubs are now about 7 weeks old and are beginning to explore their surroundings more and more. Curious, they gradually venture further and further away from the den. But suddenly there's movement in the scene. Just 4 weeks after birth, the parents are already bringing solid food to the den. The little ones wait impatiently outside. The food is freshly hunted or may also be carrion. It was buried near the den. Thanks to her memory and keen sense of smell, the mother finds it again. With her sharp teeth, she likely tears apart the remains of a roe deer for her cubs. In this way, they gradually get used to their new solid food. The father has also brought food for the little ones and watches them play for a moment before disappearing back into the thicket. I can only see him very rarely. Both the vixen and the male leave the little ones for a surprisingly long time. The parents have disappeared in the forest again, and the waiting begins all over again. I have now been filming for more than 3 weeks on this project. My initial idea was simply to film young foxes in front of their den, but this developed into a much deeper interest in the fox family. But lately, I've been seeing the little fox cubs less and less. The den seems increasingly deserted. The deer are a great pastime. They stop by at least once in a while. And then something happens so quickly that I can't even properly set up the shot, but which is nevertheless really special. A European wildcat sneaks past me, and in broad daylight. It is a truly rare and special experience to see this shy forest dweller so undisturbed and wild. After my wildcat documentary a few years ago, this was a truly wonderful experience for me. By now, I've settled well into the routine of the project, getting up early, trekking to my spot, putting on my camo and then sitting at the den for hours on end. While waiting for their mother, the 3 remaining siblings continue to spend their days playing. Every moment trains strength, skill and reaction. In the safe environment of the den, they practice sneaking up, dodging and defending. All behaviors that can later be decisive for life and survival. Playing shapes their character. It makes them curious, alert and amazingly quick to learn, qualities that make the fox one of the most adaptable animals in our landscape. New additions to the games are the first jumping exercises. They prepare the cubs for the mice jump, which is so important for hunting later on. I find foxes incredibly fascinating. Not only are they beautiful animals, but I also find their intelligence and alertness remarkable. It usually takes a few hours in the morning before the young cubs appear in front of the den. But then they roam the immediate surroundings of the entrance. By now, only 2 of the initial 4 cubs can be seen. There are no tracks or clues that could explain the disappearance of the other 2. The mortality rate for young foxes is particularly high in their first year, ranging from 50 to 75%. Theoretically, a variety of causes could be responsible. Since there are no major roads in the area, I can rule out the most common cause of death: road traffic. It is quite possible that various diseases or parasites could have claimed the cubs. Wet or cold weather can also quickly become dangerous for young foxes. Another encounter would show me just what the weather can do to these cubs. A photographer friend had given me a tip about a fox den located at a ditch between 2 fields. After several days of rain, I am in the area to check on the den. But the sight before me is a sad one. The cubs are soaked to the bone. They are shivering from the cold and exhaustion, barely able to stay on their feet. Either the water flooded the den from the ditch, or the rain and the wet crops soaked the cubs through. Once the fur is wet and fails to dry, its heat regulation function is almost completely lost. If the vixen is away from the den for long periods due to a shortage of food and cannot keep the cubs warm, the situation can quickly become critical for the little ones. I consider the situation for the cubs here to be truly precarious, and I can hardly imagine how they are supposed to survive the coming days in such a state. Nature is showing its most relentless side here, and the fate of the litter seems to be hanging by a thread. One of the cubs has been hit particularly hard. It is lying at the edge of the den. Only a single breath every few seconds and a faint whimper reveal that there's still some life energy left in it. Its sibling looks slightly better at least, but the cold and wet are also taking a significant toll on it. The intense shivering reveals how much the cub is suffering from the weather. It curls up to save energy and to warm itself up at least a little. For me, it is a truly sad sight. And so I leave the cubs to their fate. A few days later, I return. The thought of the little ones wouldn't let me go. Did they all die? I only take a brief look at the entrance through my telephoto lens. The den seems deserted. I wait for a few hours and check the entrance one last time. To my great surprise and joy, I see 2 little cubs at the den entrance. After the more than desolate condition during my last visit, this is a real sensation. I only take a few more short shots as I don't want to disturb the little ones under any circumstances. The cubs are visibly enjoying the sun. The fact that 2 of the siblings survived the critical phase is hard to believe after the past few days, and it shows just how resilient these little creatures can be. Also, at the slope of my fox den there's constant rain, fog and especially deep temperatures at night. But here, the weather doesn't seem to be the deciding factor for the cubs. Instead, it might affect the parents by limiting the availability of food. Here, the mother returns to the den without a catch. She digs up the food hidden by her and the male for such an event from their cache near the den. Caching food can play an important role for foxes. This can involve one main cache or many smaller scattered caches. Finally, she has managed it and can bring the remains to the cubs for eating and playing. And yet, some factor seems to have caused the disappearance of the other 2 cubs. Here, it becomes painfully clear to me once again that unlike in a feature film, for example, I am much more dependent on external circumstances when making a nature film. Will my protagonist be eaten, or will a hunter decide to shoot the very animal I have been observing for weeks? Is the weather bad? Is logging taking place in a forest where I want to film? All of this is not only difficult for a professional film project, but also emotionally challenging. After more than 4 weeks of filming for the project, I rarely see the puppies anymore. And when I see a small one, it is usually sitting relatively still and dozing, barely visible to me, hidden behind the vegetation. Nowadays, I can only observe this one fox cub on a regular basis. The 3rd puppy has now disappeared too. I noticed the many flies at the den. They could indicate heavy contamination by the puppies. If the inside of the den is too heavily defecated by the young, foxes often change their den. Just as in the case of disturbances, the vixen would then move with her cubs to an alternative den. This often happens after 7 to 8 weeks, but then the fox family would probably have disappeared together within a shorter period of time. The same applies if the vixen felt disturbed. It is more likely that the cubs fell victim to infection, hunting or natural predators. As for predators, an eagle owl, which nests directly in the neighboring slope, would be the primary suspect here. It is also quite possible that there was a food shortage in the territory. That would also explain the parents' long periods of absence. But I cannot entirely rule out a happy ending either. There are sources stating that at 8 to 9 weeks old, the cubs often leave the den completely to seek shelter in the nearby dense vegetation, utilizing almost the entire territory of the parents from then on. It is quite possible that I simply don't see the little ones anymore. They might still be out there somewhere in the area. The puppy, seemingly left behind alone, must now pass the time without its siblings until its parents return. Without the playful scuffles with its siblings, the little one seems almost a bit lost on the slope. It now occupies itself with branches, stones or by roaming around. In between, it repeatedly pauses to listen to the sounds of the slope or to groom itself. And so visits from the mother or father are a long-awaited change. Excited, the puppy can hardly wait until one of them is at a burrow. Despite the possible disappearance of the remaining siblings, both parents still return to the den regularly. After such a long project duration, it is becoming increasingly difficult for me to avoid being spotted by the parents. The mother looks up attentively, but fortunately cannot identify me as a human being. In recent weeks, the vixen has stopped going into the burrow, instead just peeking or sniffling briefly at the entrance. After a brief snout-to-snout contact and grooming, I can observe her suckling the remaining cub. It is an absolutely unique experience to be able to observe this. And once again, the pup is very excited. After a long time, I can also observe the male fox again. A real highlight for the cub. The male also makes use of the food cache. After digging up some bones, he spends minutes cracking them open and tearing them apart. The cub is delighted to have the food for playing. Being a wildlife explorer often means hard work. You spend countless hours searching or waiting, constantly adapting to the rhythm of the animals. I have walked the path to the fox burrow many times in recent weeks, a constant change of emotions between pure joy at being able to observe the animals and often great disappointment when the burrow seemed to be abandoned again. Sometimes it is difficult to accept that nature has its own laws. I'm just a silent observer as much as possible, but this relentless acceptance is sometimes difficult to bear. One would love to take this little fox family under one's protection and somehow help them survive those first particularly dangerous months. My time at this den is slowly coming to an end, but it is not yet the end of the entire story. And yet, I'm already infinitely grateful for the moments, the new experiences and the insights I was allowed to witness and film here with the cubs, the vixen and the male. It is exactly these moments that remind me why I choose this profession. I have spent more than 7 weeks at this fox den. One last time I can observe the male looking past the litter den. But it is a short visit. I haven't seen any of the puppies for 2 weeks. Where they have gone remains one of nature's great mysteries. And so the male quickly disappeared back into the forest. But how could life have continued for the young foxes? In the past, I have already tried to observe cubs on their first forays further away from the den. This mown meadow seems ideal for my observations. Once again, I am out and about with my camouflage. When I am at the filming location, I usually wait for more than an hour before the first foxes come out. The foxes cautiously emerge from the bushes at the edge of the meadow. At first, I can make out 3 individuals, 2 cubs and an older fox, which could be the mother. After leaving the woods, they usually rest for a few minutes to groom themselves, stretch and urinate. The fox cubs are about 3 to 4 months old. Soon, each one goes its own way directly into the meadow. During my time with the foxes, I have become able to distinguish the different individuals quite well. This one seems to be the smaller of the 2 cubs. In comparison, it still looks the fluffiest to me. Also striking is the black coloration of its snout, which extends up to the eye. This individual looks very similar to the other little one. It also still appears very cub-like. Its behavior still seems quite aimless to me. Time and again, the young fox randomly changes direction and stomps around in the meadow. I can easily recognize this fox as well. To me, it looks like an older animal and could be the mother of the cubs. The most striking thing about her is the injury to her right hind leg. She limps heavily and seems to hardly use the leg at all. Surprisingly, it still seems to restrict her movement very little. I only catch a glimpse of the fox in the background a few times as he runs past in the distance, but I recognize him immediately due to his striking, beautiful fur coloration. He too could be a parent. Perhaps he is the father of the family. As a rule, I stay hidden for at least 4 hours to film the foxes. Often, however, they are simply too far away or don't show up at all. That's why I'm also happy to see other visitors here, like this roebuck. In the meantime, the young foxes have reappeared in the meadow. In July and August, they now increasingly roam around alone. The family ties are already quite loose, so I am filming the final days before this family separates completely. The young foxes are exploring an ever-widening radius around their den. The size of their core activity areas can vary greatly and depends on the availability of food. I also see the little foxes digging in the ground again and again, apparently in search of wasp larvae. They use their front paws to dig the nests out of the ground to get to the larvae. Foxes have a broad diet including earthworms, insects, birds, fruits, berries and carrion. However, mice make up a large part of their nutrition. Because the young foxes still lack the necessary hunting experience, they mainly find invertebrates and berries themselves. Often they are still provided for by the adults until they are about 4 months old. For the cubs, it is crucial to learn and practice different hunting methods. Since the entire meadow is currently teeming with beetles, they are perfect for these first hunting exercises. In the most beautiful evening light, the foxes begin hunting for beetles. For the little ones, the beetles are especially good for training their reaction and hunting skills. And while the cubs keep leaping past the beetles, the mother shows them how it's done correctly. Even if she isn't always successful, she expertly locates the beetles in flight and snaps at them with precision. The little ones don't give up either. The beetle hunt is a prime example of the nutritional opportunism of foxes. They exploit food sources that are currently available in abundance, and at the moment the entire meadow is teeming with beetles. By now, the sun has almost set, but just as the encroaching darkness makes it nearly time for me to leave, things get exciting once more. The cub has spotted its sibling in the meadow. Interaction between the animals is now only rarely observed. The open mouth, with eyes almost closed, is a sign of friendship and could be an invitation to play. Foxes have a complex body language. They use their ears, their snout and their tail to communicate, but the sibling is clearly not interested in playing. So the cub decides to try its luck with the mother instead. Excitedly, the little one tries to convince the vixen to play. Biting the corner of the mouth is actually a signal to the mother to regurgitate food for the cub. But the vixen clearly prefers to continue hunting, and so the cub also resumes its search for food in the meadow. I have been filming this project for months, and in the process I was able to get incredibly close to the young foxes. What remains are pictures that I never even dared to dream of. An insight into an otherwise hidden world which I have earned through maximum patience, thorough preparation and my absolute passion. Once more, I leave the foxes to themselves and set off on a new adventure.